Let's talk about the recently extended trade truce between the United States and China, an announcement made by President Donald Trump. While some see it as a strategic pause, others believe the president had limited options, given China's strong negotiating position. In early August, Washington and Beijing reached a 90-day extension on their tariff ceasefire. The White House presented this as a way to buy time, secure fresh commitments on U.S. chip exports, and boost American energy sales to China. Beijing, however, holds its own cards. It remains the world's leading producer of rare earth minerals, critical for modern technology, and has just opened zero-tariff access for dozens of African nations. This move bolsters China's global influence and strengthens its hand at the negotiating table. But while Washington eased tensions with China, Canada faced a very different reality. Since August 1st, Canadian goods failing to meet USMCA rules have been hit with a 35% U.S. tariff, up from 25% just days earlier. Unlike Mexico, Canada has received no temporary relief. One neighbor gets breathing room, the other feels more heat. For President Trump, tariffs are more than economic policy, they're a bargaining tool. The reasons for imposing them vary: border security, fentanyl enforcement, dairy disputes, even banking. With China, the truce was tied to targeted exchanges. More U.S. chips from companies like NVIDIA, more American ethane for Chinese industry, and acknowledgement of Beijing's mineral advantage. With Canada, the goal appears to be sustained pressure ahead of a possible early USMCA renegotiation. Higher tariffs keep Ottawa on edge, forcing its negotiators to consider concessions before tensions escalate further. Prime Minister Mark Carney has resisted immediate retaliation. Instead, he's opted for steady dialogue paired with domestic protection. In July, Ottawa unveiled over $1 billion Canadian dollars in steel sector support, including procurement preferences for Canadian steel and aluminum, worker retraining programs, and infrastructure investments to stabilize supply. Since June 4th, U.S. tariffs on Canadian steel and aluminum have reached as high as 50%. The Canadian Steel Producers Association estimates that 6 to 6.5 million tons of steel lost access to the U.S. market. Ottawa's domestic plan aims to redirect up to 2.5 million tons to alternative buyers. Europe is an obvious choice. Under the Comprehensive Economic and Trade Agreement, CETA, most goods already move tariff-free. Current talks focus on aligning industrial strategies in sectors like steel, aluminum, and critical minerals, offering Canada a market of 450 million consumers and stable trade rules. President Trump's trade approach thrives on speed: apply tariffs, create discomfort, extract quick concessions. Carney's counter-strategy is about endurance: reinforce domestic industries, diversify exports, and keep diplomatic channels open until leverage shifts. While 85% of Canadian exports to the U.S. still move tariff-free under USMCA, the remaining share faces mounting uncertainty. For Ottawa, the challenge is clear: adapt now, or risk being boxed in by an unpredictable TR. Canada holds assets that Washington cannot easily replace, from strategic minerals and tightly integrated auto supply chains to substantial oil and gas flows. By protecting these advantages and expanding partnerships with reliable allies such as the European Union, Canada aims to withstand U.S. tariff pressure far longer than President Trump may expect. This dispute is about more than tariff rates or temporary exemptions. It is about shaping the trade rules that will define North America's economy for the next decade. And on that front, Canada is determined not to play from behind. Some Canadian leaders warn that President Trump could, with a single stroke of the pen, reopen or even withdraw from the USMCA, years ahead of the planned 2026 review. Such a move could have profound consequences for both countries. It's important to remember, Canada and the United States are deeply interconnected. Roughly 20 million Americans rely on trade with Canada for their livelihoods, just as millions of Canadians depend on U.S. jobs linked to cross-border commerce. Tariffs disrupt not just supply chains, but communities on both sides of the border. Ontario Premier Doug Ford did not wait to sound the alarm. Speaking directly to American viewers on CNN, Ford warned that Trump's tariffs are effectively a tax on the American people. He pointed to U.S. job losses: more than 37,000 manufacturing positions gone since April, marking the lowest employment in the sector in 5 years, along with $6.2 billion in added costs for the U.S. auto industry. Ford's decision to deliver his message through U.S. media was strategic. It was aimed at building political pressure inside the United States, where the economic fallout from tariffs is already visible in rising costs and shrinking job numbers. While Ford has chosen direct confrontation with Washington, Prime Minister Mark Carney has taken a different approach, one defined by strategic patience and careful calculation. Carney has stressed the need to weigh the national interest across all industries and regions, ensuring a unified Canadian response. As one senior advisor put it, it's a wise, cohesive approach that serves all Canadians, not just a single sector. After the August 1st tariff increase, Ottawa chose not to announce fresh retaliatory measures. Instead, Carney prioritized keeping communication channels open with Washington and evaluating the broader impact before acting. Part of Carney's strategy is rooted in the fact that the USMCA still protects the majority of Canadian exports. According to June data from the Royal Bank of Canada, 92% of Canadian goods entering the U.S. do so duty-free. The remaining 8%, largely steel, aluminum, and other industrial products, face the brunt of current tariffs. For Canada, sensitive products now face an average U.S. tariff of roughly 30%. Rather than rushing into concessions, Prime Minister Mark Carney's team is pursuing a calculated strategy, diversifying markets and strengthening trade relationships beyond the United States. Trade with the European Union has grown by double digits. Exports to the United Kingdom are on the rise. Senior Canadian ministers have been actively engaging with Mexico to coordinate strategy, a move aimed at preventing the divide-and-conquer approach many in Ottawa expect from President Trump during any future USMCA renegotiation. Prime Minister Carney remains diplomatic when asked about his next conversation with President Trump, offering no timeline. But Ontario Premier Doug Ford has been far less reserved. When asked for Canada's general view of Trump, Ford did not hesitate. He's probably the most disliked politician in the world in Canada. His approach focuses on highlighting the cost of tariffs to the American economy, from rising consumer prices to lost manufacturing jobs. Carney and Ford share the same objective, protecting Canada's economic position. But their methods differ sharply. Ford uses blunt, public pressure, while Carney avoids personal attacks, choosing carefully timed interventions to maximize negotiating leverage. This combination, Ford's high-volume media messaging and Carney's quiet diplomacy, has so far kept Canada's response unified while sending a clear signal to Washington. Ottawa will not fold easily. The threat of an early USMCA rupture is real. Trump has shown he is willing to bypass established timelines if it strengthens his bargaining position. Yet Canada holds leverage of its own, strategic minerals essential to U.S. manufacturing, vital energy exports, and robust agricultural trade. Trump also faces headwinds at home, rising consumer costs and job losses, which may limit his ability to escalate the trade conflict indefinitely. The challenge for Canada is to maintain its stance without closing the door to solutions that benefit both nations. Since August 1st, the standoff has become a test of endurance. Trump is applying tariff pressure to force movement, while Carney responds with strategic patience and Ford amplifies Canada's case in U.S. media. The outcome will depend on how long each side can hold, and the political cost the White House is willing to bear. This week brought another signal of Washington's aggressive trade tactics. Following the Swiss president's unsuccessful attempt to reduce tariffs during a visit to Washington, the U.S. imposed a 39% tariff on imported 1 kilogram gold bars, striking Switzerland, the world's largest gold refining hub, head-on. The August 2025 move sent shockwaves through global markets. It wasn't merely a blow to Switzerland's exports, it was a message. No commodity, no matter how established in global trade, is beyond the reach of Trump's tariff playbook. For Canada, this was a clear warning. If gold can be pulled into a tariff fight, so can other high-value sectors, including those critical to Canadian exports. From a European perspective, the effect was immediate. As one industry source put it, all shipments are on hold. There's no trading of gold bars between Europe and the United States right now. The ripple effects are being felt far beyond the Swiss border, and Canada is watching closely. Between the Atlantic and the bustling corridors of global trade, the first week of August brought a shock few had anticipated. For months, traders believed that bullion, the very symbol of enduring value, would escape the latest wave of tariff measures. The consensus was clear. Certain gold bars, such as the 400-ounce reserves used by central banks, the 100-ounce contracts traded on COMEX, and the 1 kilogram standard popular across Asian markets, would remain untouched by U.S. policy changes. That assumption shattered overnight. A Swiss gold refiner received an official notice from U.S. Customs and Border Protection. The message was precise, citing tariff code 7108.13.550, a line of numbers and words that carried enormous consequences. Under this classification, even these high-standard gold bars would now face a full 39% import duty. The immediate impact was nothing short of dramatic. Gold shipments between the United States and Europe stopped instantly. Within hours, U.S. gold prices climbed above European benchmarks, opening a significant arbitrage gap and throwing the market into confusion. According to U.S. trade records, import activity had surged in early 2025. In January alone, 43 metric tons of gold entered the country, almost double the average monthly refining output of just 22 tons. The reason? Buyers had anticipated trouble and rushed to secure supply before any new policy could take hold. Now, those pre-purchase stockpiles stand as the only buffer in an increasingly strained global gold market. This was not just a price fluctuation. It was a rupture, a sudden tear in the fabric of an interconnected supply chain. For Canada, the message is clear. While gold itself is not a primary export to the United States, the logic behind the U.S. move could apply to other sectors: strategic minerals, energy products, or high-value manufacturing components. Ottawa understands that even industries once thought immune under the USMCA trade framework can be targeted at a moment's notice. The gold shock demonstrated how trade flows built over decades can be appended by a single enforcement letter. And with President Trump's renewed emphasis on bilateral trade imbalances, Canada's own surpluses in certain commodities could quickly draw the same scrutiny Switzerland has just faced. As one Canadian official put it, "We have a lot to do in this country. We have a lot positive to do. We're building one Canadian economy." That optimism is paired with pragmatism. I have all the confidence in the world in the Prime Minister. But Donald Trump is very, very hard to deal with, because everything is so fluid. This is precisely why Prime Minister Mark Carney's approach carries such weight in today's environment. While Premier Doug Ford responds publicly with sharp economic figures, Carney works quietly behind the scenes, ensuring that negotiation channels with Washington remain open. Even as Canada absorbs a 35% tariff rate in certain sectors, Carney has deepened trade ties with Mexico, expanded agreements with the European Union, and bolstered protections for domestic industries vulnerable to sudden U.S. policy shifts. Canada's leverage lies in what the U.S. cannot easily replace: strategic minerals essential for technology manufacturing, critical energy supplies, and the tightly integrated automotive supply chain. The gold tariff episode has only reinforced Ottawa's determination to diversify export markets and establish contingency plans, not just for gold, but for steel, aluminum, copper, and beyond. The U.S. administration is targeting industries where it can exert maximum short-term leverage. Surprise is part of the strategy, keeping trading partners off balance and forcing concessions before they can organize a coordinated defense. But in Canada's case, the tactic has encountered firm resistance. Carney and Ford have presented a united front, rejecting any deal that undermines national interest, and demonstrating that Canada will not simply absorb U.S. pressure without a counter-strategy. The dispute with Switzerland is more than a bilateral hiccup, it's a global signal. Ottawa's blend of public pushback and measured diplomacy sends a clear message: Canada will not be outmaneuvered. The battle ahead is no longer about who can impose the higher tariff, but about who can adapt faster to the shocks that are still to come. And in this new trade era, adaptation is not a luxury, it is survival.